Millionaire CEO freezes as a humble mom plays the song he once taught his first love on piano. Before we dive into the story, drop a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. Enjoy the story. The rain had started just as dusk settled over the city, soft and steady, like a pianist testing the first fragile notes before a performance. From the 41st floor of the Halden Tower, the skyline shimmered beneath the water-streaked windows, the city blurred in watercolor shades of amber and gray. Inside the private dining hall of the newly renovated Elysian, all was warm light and muted luxury. Low-hanging chandeliers cast a golden glow across mahogany tables dressed in crisp linens. Waiters moved soundlessly, refilling wine glasses, delivering tasting menus with practiced ease. It was a place where the rich retreated from the world's noise to make deals, celebrate milestones, or in Caleb Morgan's case, attempt to feel something after closing a $4.2 billion merger. He sat alone at a corner table, perfectly lit but privately placed, his tailored charcoal suit immaculate, his tie precisely knotted. His assistant had made sure of it. The dinner was supposed to mark the final chapter in months of tireless negotiation. And yet, Caleb had barely touched his wine. He stared out the window instead, past the glittering high-rises, watching the raindrops chase each other down the glass like they had somewhere important to be. Across from him, the seat meant for a partner, a friend, or at the very least a warm presence, remained empty, just like it had for the last 7 years. He tapped a finger against the side of his water glass, the gesture unconscious. He should have felt triumphant, respected, untouchable. But instead, there was only a strange, hollow quiet inside him, a silence he could never quite explain. Then it happened. A sound, soft, tentative, drifting from the far side of the room where a small, baby grand piano sat mostly untouched. The first few notes were uncertain, like a memory struggling to take form. Then came the melody. Caleb froze. The fork slipped from his fingers, clinking against the porcelain. His breath caught in his throat as the room around him seemed to vanish, swallowed by the weight of the music. It was his music, a composition he hadn't heard in over a decade, not since he wrote it at 17 for a girl with fire in her voice and sadness in her smile. Emily Hart. He had named it in stillness, her voice. The piece unfolded slowly now, delicate and full of ache, as though the pianist knew its meaning intimately. And then he saw her. At the piano, seated with an elegant, familiar stillness despite the server's uniform she wore, was Emily. Her dark hair fell softly down her back. Her profile was lit gently by the pendant lights overhead. And her hands, her hands, moved over the keys with a blend of reverence and muscle memory, as though they had never stopped playing this song. Caleb stood before he realized it, the chair scraping slightly against the floor. His heart thundered, not from excitement, but disbelief, grief, longing. He didn't know how to name what surged through him. 13 years had passed. 13 years since she vanished without warning. No goodbye, no closure, only silence and unanswered questions. For years, he had told himself to move on, to bury the music, the letters, the pain. But now she was here. And she was playing their song in a restaurant he had chosen only because it was new, exclusive, and quiet. Her eyes lifted as the last note faded, almost as if she sensed him. Their gazes met across the room. And in that moment, everything Caleb Morgan had spent his life building, the company, the power, the illusion of control, fell away. All that remained was the memory of a 17-year-old boy who once believed in forever. He stepped forward, slowly, afraid any sudden movement would shatter the fragile reality before him. Emily's expression didn't change. She looked at him not like a ghost from the past, but like someone who had been expecting him. There was no smile, no anger, just a deep, quiet sorrow that stopped him cold. Before he could speak, she turned and walked through a side door marked staff only, her figure disappearing into the hallway. The music was gone, but its echo remained. In the stillness of the restaurant, in the tremor of his fingers, and in the space where the past had suddenly and violently returned. Caleb stood alone in a room full of people, feeling every moment he had ever lost, every word he never got to say. He had built a life of silence. But tonight, the melody had broken through, and everything was about to change. The woman who disappeared. Caleb Morgan had negotiated mergers with billion-dollar stakes riding on every clause, faced rooms full of skeptical investors, and walked into boardrooms knowing the wrong word could cost empires. But nothing prepared him for the walk from his table to the edge of the stage that night. The moment Emily Hart lifted her hands from the final chord and looked up, their eyes locked. Time, that thief collapsed between them. Her face, slightly older, slightly thinner, but unmistakably hers, was a map of memories he had tried for years to forget. For a second, neither of them moved. Then she blinked rapidly, nodded to the applause from the dining room, and slipped off the bench with the grace of someone used to making herself small. Caleb followed. Not immediately. He sat for one more minute, forcing himself to breathe, to not collapse into emotion. Then, setting his untouched glass down, he crossed the room. Emily was behind the service door, marked staff only. A younger waiter looked up as Caleb pushed in. "Can I help you, sir?" "I'm looking for the pianist," Caleb said, his voice a low mix of restraint and urgency. The kid gestured toward a narrow hallway. "Break room. Last door on the left." Caleb hesitated before knocking. "Come in," came her voice. She was still in her uniform, black slacks, white blouse, slightly wrinkled, hair pulled into a simple bun. She didn't rise when she saw him, just stared for a long second, then sat back into the creaky chair and folded her arms. "You weren't supposed to be here tonight," she said quietly. "I didn't know you worked here," he replied. A beat passed, then another. 13 years, Emily. You disappeared." She gave a breathy laugh. "Did I? Or did someone make sure you thought I did?" Caleb furrowed his brow. "What does that mean?" Emily looked past him to a spot on the wall, her jaw working. "I wrote you. Every week. For months. I called, came to your apartment when you didn't respond. Your roommate said you'd moved. No forwarding address. No explanation. Because I never got a single letter, Caleb," she said, eyes sharp now, voice trembling. "Not one." He blinked. "That's impossible. I mailed them. Dozens. I even sent you the one with the song sheets. The ones Your mother came to visit me 2 weeks after you left for London," Emily said, cutting him off. "She came to the cafe where I worked and sat down like a client in a job interview. And she made it very clear that you would not be coming back for me." Caleb froze. "She what?" "She told me you were meeting diplomats, that you'd be engaged within the year. She said she was helping you build something extraordinary and that I was a chapter you turned." He stepped back, the weight of it hitting like ice water. That's a lie. I didn't know that. I was 19. I believed her. And when my letters started coming back unopened, when your number changed..." Caleb sat down heavily. His breath shook. "She never told me. She said you were done, that you'd met someone at school and moved on." Emily looked away. Her arms hugged her midsection. "It doesn't matter now." He looked at her. Really looked. The hollow under her cheekbones, the weight she carried in her shoulders, the calloused fingers. This was not the girl he left. This was a woman who had survived. "It does matter," he said. She stood then, walked to the old coffee machine, and poured herself a cup. She didn't offer him one. She didn't need to. "Why did you play that song tonight?" She turned slowly, the steam curling around her face. "Because it was Liam's birthday." The name struck like a cymbal in a silent room. "Oh." Emily set the cup down. "Liam," she repeated. "He's 12 now. He has your eyes." Caleb felt the air go out of his lungs. Your son," she said, voice cracking but steady. "He's our son." The walls spun. Caleb pressed a hand against the table to steady himself. "Why didn't you tell me?" Emily looked at him, eyes brimming. "I tried. I wrote letters. I left messages. Your mother blocked every road." He stood pacing now, rage, confusion, and sorrow twisting in his chest. "Where is he?" "With his godmother. He thinks I work late shifts. He doesn't know you exist." Caleb turned slowly. "I want to meet him. It's not that simple." He raised his voice just enough. "He's my son. He doesn't know that. He has a life, a school, a world I've built from scratch. Without me. Emily looked down. A single tear fell onto her hand. Because I had to. Caleb took a breath, then another. Sat back down. Okay, tell me about him. She looked up, surprised. What? I want to know who he is. What he likes. His favorite food. His hobbies. What makes him laugh. I missed 12 years. Don't make me miss one more second. Emily studied him for a long time. Then she reached in her purse, pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a school program. Liam Morganhart. Piano recital. 3rd grade. There, in the top corner, a photo. A boy with chestnut hair and Caleb's unmistakable eyes. Caleb's voice cracked. He plays. Emily nodded. He's good. Not because of me. Because he hears music in the way you used to. I never told him where it came from. He traced the photo with his finger. Will you let me meet him? She hesitated, then nodded once. But not as his father. Not yet. As a friend. A teacher, maybe. If he asks, we'll tell him. But he deserves to know you slowly. To trust you on his own terms. Caleb nodded, fighting tears. Anything. I'll take anything you give me. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. And in that silence, something old and broken began, cautiously, to mend. Notes from a stranger. The morning sun cast a golden hue over the city as Kayla Morgan stood nervously outside a modest suburban home. The weight of anticipation pressed heavily on his shoulders. Today, he would meet Liam, the son he never knew he had. Emily had arranged the meeting, introducing Caleb as an old friend interested in giving music lessons. It was a delicate ruse, but necessary. Liam had no idea who Caleb truly was, and Emily believed it was best to ease him into the truth. The door opened, and there stood Liam, a 12-year-old boy with tousled brown hair and inquisitive eyes that mirrored Caleb's own. He held a guitar, its neck resting comfortably in his small hands. "Hi," Liam greeted, his voice tinged with curiosity. "Hello, Liam," Caleb replied, forcing a smile. "I'm Caleb. Your mom mentioned you might be interested in some guitar lessons." Liam nodded, stepping aside to let him in. The living room was cozy, filled with the warmth of a lived-in home. Musical instruments adorned the space, evidence of Liam's budding passion. They sat down, and Caleb watched as Liam effortlessly strummed a few chords. The boy's fingers danced across the strings with a familiarity that spoke of countless hours of practice. "You're quite talented," Caleb remarked, genuinely impressed. "Thanks," Liam replied shyly. "I've been playing for a few years now. Music helps me think." Caleb's heart swelled with a mix of pride and sorrow. He had missed so much: first steps, first words, birthdays. Yet, here was a chance to connect, to be a part of Liam's life, even if only as a mentor for now. They spent the next hour immersed in music. Caleb introduced Liam to new techniques, and Liam eagerly absorbed every lesson. Their shared passion created an unspoken bond, bridging the gap of years lost. As the lesson concluded, Liam looked up at Caleb, his eyes filled with curiosity. "You really know a lot about music," he said. "Did you always play?" Caleb hesitated, memories flooding back. "Yes, I did. Music has always been a big part of my life." Liam smiled. "Maybe you can teach me more next time?" Caleb nodded, emotion choking his voice. "I'd like that, Liam. I like that very much." As he left the house, Caleb felt a renewed sense of purpose. The road ahead would be challenging, filled with truths to unveil and relationships to mend. But for now, he had taken the first step towards being a part of his son's life, one note at a time. A mother's interference. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the Morgan estate, casting elongated shadows across the marble floor. Caleb stood in the grand foyer, his footsteps echoing as he approached the study where his mother, Vivian Morgan, spent most of her mornings. The weight of revelations from Emily pressed heavily on his shoulders, each step toward the study a confrontation with a past he thought he understood. Vivian looked up from her desk, her expression a blend of surprise and concern. "Caleb, you're here early. Everything all right?" He closed the door behind him, the soft click resonating in the silent room. "We need to talk." She gestured to the chair opposite her. "Of course. What's on your mind?" Caleb remained standing, his gaze piercing. Emily, Liam. Vivian's hands paused mid-motion, the color draining slightly from her face. What about them? You told me she left, that she moved on, that she didn't want to be found. Vivian sighed, standing to face her son. Caleb, I did what I thought was best for you. For your future. By intercepting letters? By ensuring I never knew about my own son? She looked away, the weight of her actions evident. You were young, ambitious. I couldn't let anything derail your path. You took away my choice, my right to know, to be a father. Vivian's eyes met his, tears welling. I thought I was protecting you. I see now that I was wrong. Caleb's voice softened, a mix of anger and sorrow. You didn't just steal time. You stole trust, memories, moments I can never get back. Vivian reached out, her hand trembling. I'm sorry, Caleb. Truly. He stepped back, the distance between them more than just physical. Sorry doesn't change the past. But maybe, just maybe, we can find a way forward. The room fell into silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavily. In that moment, both mother and son stood at the precipice of reconciliation, the path ahead uncertain but not impossible. Trading power for presence. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of Caleb Morgan's penthouse, casting elongated shadows across the marble floor. He stood in the grand foyer, his footsteps echoing as he approached the study where his mother, Vivian Morgan, spent most of her mornings. The weight of revelations from Emily pressed heavily on his shoulders, each step toward the study a confrontation with a past he thought he understood. Vivian looked up from her desk, her expression a blend of surprise and concern. Caleb, you're here early. Everything all right? He closed the door behind him, the soft click resonating in the silent room. We need to talk. She gestured to the chair opposite her. Of course. What's on your mind? Caleb remained standing, his gaze piercing. Emily, Liam. Vivian's hands paused mid-motion, the color draining slightly from her face. What about them? You told me she left, that she moved on, that she didn't want to be found. Vivian sighed, standing to face her son. Caleb, I did what I thought was best for you. For your future. By intercepting letters? By ensuring I never knew about my own son? She looked away, the weight of her actions evident. You were young, ambitious. I couldn't let anything derail your path. You took away my choice, my right to know, to be a father. Vivian's eyes met his, tears welling. I thought I was protecting you. I see now that I was wrong. Caleb's voice softened, a mix of anger and sorrow. You didn't just steal time. You stole trust, memories, moments I can never get back. Vivian reached out, her hand trembling. I'm sorry, Caleb. Truly. He stepped back, the distance between them more than just physical. Sorry doesn't change the past. But maybe, just maybe, we can find a way forward. The room fell into silence, the weight of unspoken words hanging heavily. In that moment, both mother and son stood at the precipice of reconciliation, the path ahead uncertain but not impossible. The night, everything broke. The rain began just before sunset, a soft drizzle that quickly turned into a relentless downpour, drumming against the city sidewalks like a heartbeat no one could quiet. Inside the ornate doors of the Westbridge Cultural Hall, warmth and music pushed back the storm, if only for a few hours. The annual Harmony Benefit was in full swing. Guests in elegant black tie attire sipped champagne beneath chandeliers, mingling with philanthropists, artists, and those simply drawn by the promise of a good cause. For Caleb Morgan, it was supposed to be a celebration. His company had quietly underwritten the event in full, with proceeds going to local youth music programs, a promise he'd made weeks earlier after meeting Liam. It was a step toward building something meaningful, not just as a CEO, but as a father. He stood near the back of the auditorium, arms crossed, watching as students took the stage one by one. Then came the performance he had been waiting for. Emily, radiant in a simple black gown, walked gracefully toward the grand piano. The applause was warm, but she didn't seem to hear it. Her eyes were fixed on the keys, on the story they were about to tell. She played a piece she had written herself, gentle, aching, filled with spaces that echoed loss and resilience. Caleb felt every note tighten something in his chest. In the wings, Liam stood watching her, his small hands clutched around a single rose he planned to give his mother after the show. Dressed in a navy blazer and slacks, the boy looked both proud and nervous. Caleb had offered to sit with him, but Liam had insisted he wanted to surprise her. Neither of them noticed the woman who had slipped in quietly through the service corridor, bypassing the crowd entirely. Vivian Morgan, cloaked in a gray wool coat despite the warmth of the building, found her way backstage with the confidence of someone who had spent decades navigating places she didn't belong in but always made her presence known. She waited until Emily's final note faded, then intercepted her just as she exited the stage. "We need to talk." Emily stiffened. "Not here. Exactly here, where no one can see us," Vivian said, her voice low, precise. "I'm offering you one last opportunity to do the right thing." Emily narrowed her eyes. "The right thing for whom?" Vivian pulled an envelope from her purse. "For everyone. Take this. Use it to start over, somewhere far away. Somewhere Caleb won't follow." Emily looked at the envelope as though it were poison. "You really haven't changed." "Neither have you," Vivian snapped. "Still clinging to scraps, still trying to pull him into your version of smallness." "I don't want his money. I never have." "Then prove it," Vivian said. "Walk away. Leave Caleb to his future. He doesn't need a son weighing him down with complications." "You mean your legacy doesn't need the scandal?" The silence that followed was sharp. Neither woman realized that behind a pillar, Liam stood frozen. He had come down to find his mother, the rose still in his hand, when he heard his grandmother's voice. The words pierced through him like ice. "He doesn't need a son. Weigh him down." It wasn't just the shock of hearing what she said. It was the familiarity in her voice, the one he remembered from his earliest childhood visits to the Morgan household before he and Emily left the city. A voice he once thought kind. He turned and ran. By the time Emily realized he had been there, all that remained was a crumpled rose lying on the carpet. "He's gone." Caleb's voice trembled as Emily met him in the hallway moments later. He heard her. The whole thing. "I think he saw the envelope." Her voice cracked. "I shouldn't have let her near me." Caleb didn't hesitate. He bolted toward the lobby, Emily close behind. Outside, the rain fell in sheets now, soaking them within seconds as they burst through the front doors. "He doesn't know this part of the city," Emily said, scanning the streets desperately. "He doesn't even have a phone." "We'll find him," Caleb said, though panic was closing in on his chest. They split up. Caleb headed north through the streets near the park. Emily took the direction of the old train station. They asked vendors, checked alleyways, called out through the rain. Hours passed. The cold crept in beneath Caleb's coat. Rain trickled down his spine, plastering his shirt to his skin. But he didn't care. He kept walking, calling Liam's name until his voice grew hoarse. It was near midnight when Emily finally called him. "I found him." She gave him the address of a small music store, closed for the night, but its awning provided shelter. Liam sat curled beneath it, his blazer soaked, arms around his knees, the rose still clutched in one fist. Caleb arrived moments later, heart in his throat. He approached slowly. "Liam." The boy looked up, eyes red-rimmed. He didn't say anything. Caleb crouched down. "I'm so sorry. You heard something tonight you were never meant to hear. Something cruel and untrue." Liam's voice was barely a whisper. "She said you didn't want me." Caleb's heart shattered. "That's not true. Not even close. I didn't know about you until a few weeks ago. If I had, Liam, I would have been there every single day." Liam stared at the rose. Then why did she sound so sure? Caleb reached out, placing a hand over the boy's trembling fingers. "Because some people are afraid of love that doesn't look the way they planned. My mother, she made choices I don't agree with. But I'm choosing differently. I choose you." Liam looked up at him, the pain still fresh, but no longer solitary. "Is it okay if we go home?" he asked. Caleb nodded, tears finally escaping down his cheeks. "Yeah, buddy, let's go home." Later that night, after a warm bath and cocoa, Liam lay in bed wrapped in his favorite blanket. Caleb sat beside him, not speaking, just being there. Present. Do you think music makes people tell the truth? Liam asked drowsily. Caleb smiled gently. I think music is the truth some people don't know how to say. Liam closed his eyes. Then I'll keep playing, so no one forgets. Caleb leaned down and kissed his forehead. I won't forget. Not ever. And for the first time in his life, Caleb Morgan stayed exactly where he needed to be. Not in a boardroom, not chasing a merger, but beside the son he almost lost before he ever knew him. Truth in the park. The rain had slowed to a gentle mist by the time Caleb Morgan spotted a small figure on the park bench, framed beneath the bare branches of the sycamore tree where he and Emily used to sit after school. His breath caught. The boy was soaked through, hunched into himself, arms wrapped tightly around his guitar case like it was the only solid thing in his world. Caleb stepped closer, shoes crunching on wet gravel. Emily walked a pace behind him, silent except for her breath hitching in the cold air. When they reached the bench, Caleb stopped, giving Liam a moment to register their presence. Liam didn't look up. Caleb cleared his throat softly. This park. This is where your mom and I first met. Right over there, he said, pointing to the cracked concrete stage near the duck pond. I was 16. She was 15. She played Debussy. I played everything too fast. A ghost of a smile flickered across Liam's face, barely there. Emily stepped forward slowly. You were always so good at slowing down when you played with me. I think you liked the way we sounded together more than you realized. The silence stretched long. Finally, Liam spoke. Why didn't you tell me? Caleb lowered himself slowly onto the far end of the bench, careful not to crowd his son. Because I didn't know, he said quietly. Not until a few weeks ago. Liam turned, finally meeting his father's eyes. There was no rage in them, just the deep, aching confusion of a boy who had spent 12 years wondering and was suddenly flooded with answers. But why didn't you look for us? Why didn't you try harder? Emily sat on the ground in front of them, knees to her chest. Her eyes brimmed with tears. I did, she said. I tried. I sent letters to his dorm. I called the house. I even visited his mother once. She told me he didn't want to see me anymore, that he'd moved on. Caleb looked down, shame knotting in his throat. I never got those letters. I never knew. My mother, she thought she was protecting me. She told me you vanished, that you took off without a word. Liam's hands tightened around the guitar case. He stared ahead, watching the reflections of streetlights shimmer on puddles. I spent years writing music about you, he whispered. I imagine what kind of person my dad might be. Mom never lied, but she never told me much either. Just that you were someone she once loved. Caleb swallowed hard. I never stopped loving her, Liam. I just didn't know. I would have been there. I would have done everything differently. But you didn't, Liam said. Not accusing, just stating fact. No, Caleb agreed. I didn't, and I can't change that. But I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere. Liam looked at his mother. Her cheeks were damp, hair plastered to her forehead. Is that true? He asked. Emily nodded. He's been showing up, even when it's hard, even when it's messy. Liam drew a long breath. Do you want to be my dad? The question hit Caleb like a blow to the chest. More than anything, he said, his voice breaking. But only if you want me to. I won't force this. You've had your own life, and I. Liam held up a hand. You don't have to be perfect. Just be here now. The words undid something deep inside Caleb. His shoulders shook. He looked away, trying to hold it together, but the tears came anyway. For the boy he didn't get to hold. For the birthdays missed. For the lullabies never sung. For every afternoon spent chasing deals when he could have been chasing footballs in the yard. Emily reached out and placed her hand over his. Caleb took a shaky breath and turned to Liam. Can we start over? Liam considered it. No, he said simply. But we can start from here. In the distance, the church bells chimed 9 o'clock. The storm had passed. The park, soaked in moonlight and possibility, held its breath as a new family began to take shape, not from perfection, but from presence. They sat there for a long time, 3 notes in the same chord, finally beginning to play the music that had waited over a decade to be heard. Music and mendings. The late autumn light filtered through the curtains of Emily's small living room, warming the wooden floorboards and highlighting the edges of dust motes floating gently in the air. A beat-up guitar case rested near the couch. Its leather was worn smooth in places, the metal latches dull and scratched. Liam had placed it there hours earlier after school, but hadn't opened it yet. It was always like this lately, the quiet ritual of waiting, of letting the day shed itself slowly before anything meaningful could begin. Caleb sat in the armchair near the window, elbows resting on his knees, fingers laced together. He didn't speak. He had learned not to fill the silence. The first time he had come over playing music with Liam, he had brought enthusiasm, awkward jokes, and questions he thought would help them connect. But they hadn't. The only thing that did was sound, the press of strings, the rise and fall of chords, and the occasional synchronized strum when they found themselves accidentally, miraculously in harmony. So now he waited. Liam entered the room, his hair tousled, a school workbook tucked under one arm. He nodded at Caleb, not speaking either. He sat cross-legged on the rug and unlatched the guitar case. The soft creak of the hinges, the reverent way Liam lifted the instrument. It was a ceremony now, one that Caleb had come to respect deeply. Without a word, Liam began to play. It started as a simple melody, something familiar, something Caleb recognized from a week ago. But Liam had added to it. A variation in the middle, a lingering note, a shift from major to minor that carried more emotion than any conversation they'd had since the truth broke open in the park. Caleb waited for his turn. Then he reached for his own guitar, a Taylor GS Mini he had bought just for this purpose. His fingers were slower now, stiffer than they'd been his teenage years, but the muscle memory was still there. He caught Liam's rhythm, matched it, then added a quiet harmony. The music flowed. Not perfectly, but it didn't need to be. And that was the revelation. They didn't need to be perfect, just present. They played for over an hour, stopping only when Emily came in with hot cocoa and a look of quiet wonder on her face. She didn't say anything either. She didn't need to. The music said it all. That night, after Caleb packed his guitar away and stood to leave, Liam looked up from the couch. "Dad," he said softly. Caleb froze. Liam repeated it, this time with a tentative smile. "Good night, Dad." Caleb nodded slowly, emotions swelling in his throat. "Good night, Liam." The music program was Emily's idea, a seed she had carried. For years, buried beneath the weight of single parenthood and 3 part-time jobs. But now, with Caleb's quiet support, not his name, not his money flaunted, just support, the idea began to take root. They rented a small community hall on Jefferson Street, one that smelled of old linoleum and optimism. Caleb brought in volunteers from his company's audio division. Emily recruited kids from the neighborhood, ones who had never touched a piano key or plucked a string. The first session had 4 students. By the 3rd week, there were 14. Liam came every Saturday. He didn't say much, but he showed up, tuning guitars for the younger kids, scribbling notes on practice sheets, demonstrating techniques without arrogance. Caleb watched him from the back of the room, his heart aching with pride. One afternoon, while stacking chairs after class, Caleb found Emily adjusting the settings on an old keyboard. "You were incredible today," he said. She smiled without looking up. "You always say that." "Because it's always true." She glanced over her shoulder, then straightened. "It means a lot, you being here. Not just for Liam. For this. For me." He nodded, words catching behind the lump in his throat. "I missed too many years. I want to do it right now." Emily reached for his hand, squeezed it gently. "You are." One rainy evening in November, they hosted a small recital at the community center. Just a few folding chairs, a rented sound system, and hand-printed programs stapled with care. Liam opened the show. He stood center stage with a guitar nearly as tall as him, the spotlight soft on his curls. Caleb stood beside the stage, recording with trembling hands. Liam introduced his piece. "This is a song I wrote. It's called Second Chances. I wrote it with my dad." The crowd applauded. Caleb felt his eyes sting. The melody was simple, but in every note was a bridge between lost time and future hope, between silence and song, between a boy and his father. Emily wiped her eyes beside Caleb. "You're doing it," she whispered. He nodded, unable to speak. Music had carried them through. It still would. And in every chord, they were finding their way back to each other. Together. The ice breaks. The sterile scent of antiseptic clung to the corridors of St. Augustine Memorial as the late afternoon light filtered through the windows. Caleb Morgan paced outside room 217, the echoes of his polished shoes bouncing down the quiet hall. He had faced quarterly earnings calls, billion-dollar mergers, even congressional hearings with more composure than this moment. But watching his mother, Vivian Morgan, pale and motionless in a hospital bed, was something his steel exterior hadn't prepared him for. She had collapsed that morning. A mild heart attack, the doctors said. Not life-threatening, but serious. Enough to reset everything. Caleb had called Emily immediately. She came without hesitation, her presence calm but strained. And now, hours later, she stood beside him in the waiting lounge, arms crossed, her eyes not accusing, just tired. She asked to see Liam, Emily said quietly. Not you. Not the board. Liam. Caleb ran a hand through his hair. She doesn't even know him. Maybe she wants to change that. Emily handed him a folded note. Vivian's handwriting, once sharp and elegant, now slightly shaky. Please let him come. Just him. Bring the keyboard. No audience. Just music. The note stunned Caleb. Vivian had once called music a distraction from legacy. A nurse approached. You can go in now, but just one visitor, please. Emily turned to Liam. He clutched the small keyboard case they had brought from home, his eyes wide, uncertain. You don't have to if you don't want, Caleb told him. Liam looked up. She asked for me. That means something. He walked slowly into the room. Caleb stayed behind, watching through the glass pane in the door. Vivian looked older than he remembered. Not just frail, small. The layers of confidence and control she always wore had been peeled back by pain and truth. Liam stood at the foot of her bed. Hi, he said simply. Vivian opened her eyes and smiled faintly. Hello, Liam. Thank you for coming. He set the keyboard on a rolling table and pulled a chair beside it. For a long beat, neither spoke. Do you know why I asked for you? She finally said. He shrugged. Because you wanted to hear music? Because you're the only person in this family who plays it without wanting anything in return. He didn't understand, not fully, but he nodded. Vivian extended a trembling hand. May I? Liam looked at her, hesitant. Then he lifted the keyboard into her lap, plugging in the small speaker. He played the first few notes of a piece he had written with Caleb, a simple progression, minor to major, echoing sadness and hope. Vivian listened. Then, with uncertain fingers, she added a harmony. The boy and the woman who had once tried to erase his existence played together, the notes fragile, like truce offerings passed between generations. Outside the room, Emily joined Caleb. He's playing for her. Caleb let out a breath. I never thought I'd see that day. The music faded. Vivian leaned back against her pillow. You have your mother's fire, she whispered, and your father's soul. I see it now. I didn't want it before, but I do. Liam's voice was quiet. Why did you want me gone? Vivian didn't flinch. Because I was afraid. Afraid Caleb would give up everything to be your father. And I wanted the world for him, not me, not the pain I thought you would bring. I was wrong. Liam looked at her. You can't take back what you did. No, she said, but I can be better now, if you let me. He didn't answer. Instead, he reached forward and pressed a few keys, the last bars of their unfinished song. Back at home that evening, Caleb found Liam in the living room, tinkering with the melody. She said, I have your soul, Liam muttered. She used to say, I didn't have one, Caleb replied, sitting beside him. You must have brought it back. Liam looked up. She asked if she could hear me play again. Do you want that? Liam nodded. She wasn't what I expected. I thought she'd be meaner. Caleb smiled. She has her moments. They sat in quiet harmony, father and son, no longer strangers bound by blood, but something deeper now. Choice. Emily entered with mugs of tea, handing one to each. She told me, Emily said, sitting across from them, that you're both rebuilding something she almost destroyed. She wants to help now. Caleb met her gaze. Should we let her? Emily didn't answer right away. Let's see if her actions match her words. Liam picked up the keyboard again. I want to finish our song. Maybe she can hear it at the next recital. Caleb ruffled his hair. Let's write her apart. And so they did. Not just music, but forgiveness. The ice that had defined a lifetime was breaking, note by note. A proposal in G minor. The old music room hadn't changed much. The walls were still paneled with the same honeyed oak, the windows still framed with those dusty velvet curtains that caught the light in late afternoon like a memory too stubborn to fade. The piano, though, had been restored. It gleamed now, black and proud, as if it had been waiting for them to come back. Caleb Morgan stood just outside the door, holding his breath. The air smelled of polish and old wood, faintly of the jasmine Emily used to wear. He had arranged this quietly, reaching out to the community center director, offering to fund new instruments and renovation, on one condition, that today, this room was his. Emily was already inside when he arrived. He'd asked Jenna, her friend and co-director of the community music program, to bring her here under the pretense of reviewing new student applications. Caleb could see her through the small square window on the door. She stood with her back to him, running her fingers across the piano's keys without pressing them, like tracing the past. He took a deep breath and pushed the door open. She turned, surprised, but not startled, the way she always used to when she sensed him before she saw him. "You did this," she said softly. Caleb stepped into the room, the old floorboards creaking under his weight. He held a small velvet box in his right hand, and something in his chest felt both weightless and unbearably heavy. "I had to," he said. "It was always this room, this place where we met, where everything started, where I watched you fall in love with every note." Emily smiled faintly. "I thought I'd never see you here again." He swallowed hard. "I bought something once, a long time ago, the week before I left for Boston." She looked at him, her eyes deep and knowing. "You kept it." Caleb nodded, his fingers trembling as he opened the box. Inside lay a ring, platinum, with a single sapphire set into a delicate band. It caught the sunlight streaming through the high windows and scattered it across the room like blue fire. "I kept it," he said. "All these years. I was going to give it to you before Christmas break. I never got the chance." Emily stepped closer, her voice steady despite the tremble in her chin. "Why now, Caleb?" He smiled, his eyes bright with unshed tears. "Because now I finally understand what it means. It's not just about promises. It's about redemption, about doing the hard work, about showing up when it matters. I didn't forget you, Emily. Not a single day, and I don't want to miss another." She didn't answer right away. Instead, she turned to the piano, lifted the lid, and sat down on the bench. For a moment, she simply looked at the keys. Then, slowly, gently, she began to play. It was their song, the melody Caleb had written when he was 17 and hopelessly in love. The melody she had carried with her through every hardship, through single motherhood, long nights, empty holidays. He crossed the room quietly and sat beside her. His hand rested next to hers on the keys, not pressing, just feeling the vibration of the music. She reached the middle section, his favorite, and paused. Her fingers hovered in the air. Caleb leaned close. "That part always made you cry." "It still does," she whispered. He slid the ring out of the box and gently placed it on the piano between them. Emily looked down, then up at him. "I never needed a ring, Caleb." "I know," he said, "but I need to give it. I need you to know this isn't just about making up for lost time. It's about building what comes next." She touched the sapphire with one finger. Her voice caught as she spoke. "I can't promise perfect," she said. "I'm not asking for perfect," he replied. "Just real. Just us." Outside the room, the hallway buzzed with the faint sounds of children arriving for lessons. Life moving forward. But inside, the moment stood still. Emily picked up the ring, turned it in her hand, then slipped it on. She didn't say yes. She didn't have to. She played the final notes of their song instead. And for Caleb, that was the only answer he needed. The weeks that followed were quiet, but full. Caleb didn't announce the engagement to the world. There were no public statements or media buzz, just a slow return to something that felt like home. He began spending more time at the community center, funding music programs, sitting in on lessons, sometimes just watching from the back as Emily taught. Liam would peek in from time to time, always pretending he wasn't checking to see if his dad was there. One afternoon, Caleb arrived early. Liam was already in the room, playing a new song he'd composed. It was hopeful, sweet, and unmistakably theirs. Caleb sat down quietly beside him. "That's new," he said. Liam nodded. "I call it half full." "Why?" "Because we missed a lot. But now we're filling the rest." Caleb swallowed the lump in his throat and placed a hand gently on his son's shoulder. Outside, snow began to fall, soft, slow, and silent. Inside, music played on, and 3 lives, once fractured, found their way toward wholeness. Not through grand gestures, but through melody, through memory, and through a promise finally kept. The trio. The community auditorium wasn't built for grandeur. Its wooden floors creaked when you walked across the stage, and the old curtains smelled faintly of mothballs. But that night, under the soft glow of modest stage lights, it became something far greater than any concert hall. It became a sanctuary. The audience was a patchwork of people from every corner of the city. Children from low-income schools, single parents, music teachers, retired musicians, and donors who had once walked by suffering without really seeing it. At the center of it all was the small sign above the stage. Hope in Harmony, a fundraiser for youth music access. Backstage, Kayla Morgan sat quietly, tuning the cello he hadn't touched in over a decade. His hands were steady, but his heart pounded with the nervous tremble of a man about to reveal something sacred. Nearby, Liam sat cross-legged on a folding chair, gently plucking at his guitar. Strings, his eyes closed in deep focus. Emily adjusted the hem of her black dress in front of a cracked mirror. Her fingers, long and slender, hovered over invisible piano keys as she rehearsed silently. It had been years since she played in front of an audience, and never with the 2 people who had reshaped her world. One through Love Reborn, the other through the sheer miracle of being born. Jenna peeked through the curtain. "It's a full house," she whispered. "They're ready for you." Caleb exhaled slowly. "Are we ready for them?" Emily met his eyes. "We're not playing for them, remember? We're playing for the parts of us that never got a voice." Liam looked up, a small smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "Let's give them a reason to believe again." When the trio stepped onto the stage, the room hushed. There was something unmistakable about the way they moved together, not choreographed but in sync, a rhythm older than memory, yet newly discovered. Caleb took his place at the far left, Liam in the center, and Emily to the right at the upright piano. The first notes were hesitant, like breath returning after a long cry. Emily led with the melody, a soft, aching phrase that carried echoes of every silent goodbye and every tear-soaked letter that had never been read. Her fingers trembled but didn't falter. Then Liam entered, his guitar weaving beneath her notes like a second heartbeat, steady and raw. His part was new but carried the soul of someone who had waited too long to ask the question, "Who am I?" His music answered it with clarity only pain could sculpt. Finally, Caleb lowered his bow to the strings. The cello groaned into life, a deep, resonant sorrow that filled the cracks left by time. It wasn't perfect, a note wavered, a breath was missed, but that made it all the more human, more real. And then something happened. The music lifted. It transformed from a personal lament into a collective memory. It held the weight of love lost and regained, of family betrayed and rebuilt. The song, which had once been just a private melody between 2 young dreamers, now belonged to everyone in the room. Phones were lifted, tears wiped. Someone in the third row sobbed openly. Another clasped their partner's hand. A child in the front row stared wide-eyed, guitar case at his feet, watching Liam as though seeing his future unfold. At the final chord, the trio paused. No one moved. Silence reigned for 5 seconds, then 10, and then a wave. Applause erupted like a thunderstorm, rising in volume, building in force. People stood, not because they were supposed to, but because their hearts demanded it. It was not just for the music, but for the story that had poured through every note. A story they all recognized in some way. Of hurt, of healing, of hope. Jenna recorded it all. She uploaded the performance to the fundraiser's page that night, captioning it simply, "The Trio. Music is a second chance." Within 48 hours, the video had gone viral. News outlets picked it up. Headlines read, CEO, single mom, and their son share viral song of redemption. Caleb watched the numbers climb, not with the thrill of a tech tycoon tracking shares, but with quiet awe, because this time, the value couldn't be measured in dollars. It was measured in messages from people who had lost fathers, reconciled with estranged children, picked up forgotten instruments, or written long overdue letters. That night, after the performance, the trio walked home in silence. Emily clutched Caleb's hand, and Liam walked between them, his guitar slung across his back. At a crosswalk, Caleb turned to them. Tonight didn't feel like a performance. It felt like coming home. Emily leaned her head on his shoulder. It was... Liam said nothing, but he reached into his jacket and pulled out a folded piece of paper. I started writing something new, he said quietly. It's about everything. Us. He handed it to Caleb. Chords, lyrics, notes scribbled with the hunger of someone discovering who he was and who he wanted to be. Caleb smiled through misted eyes. They had played one song together, but the music was far from over. A name shared, a future rewritten. The first morning of fall arrived with a crisp breeze rustling through the golden leaves outside Kayla Morgan's townhouse. In the living room, sun poured through tall windows, casting light on Liam as he sat cross-legged on the rug, tuning his guitar. The boy's fingers moved with ease now, more confident, more certain. Across the room, Emily placed a delicate sapphire tie pin onto a velvet box and closed it gently. Caleb had left early for final preparations, but his absence lingered warmly in every corner of the house, not as a void, but as a quiet pulse of belonging. Today was more than an announcement. Today they launched a legacy. At the heart of downtown, the newly renovated Civic Center bustled with quiet energy. Banners bearing the name The Heart and Morgan Foundation fluttered in the wind there. Bold blue and silver lettering striking against the autumn sky. Inside, the auditorium brimmed with students, parents, teachers, and reporters. There was a sense that something bigger than a press event was about to unfold, something that whispered of second chances, of lives redirected by hope. Backstage, Caleb straightened his jacket, glancing in the mirror. His reflection no longer looked like the man who had once buried himself in mergers and market forecasts. Today, his tie bore a single thread of deep blue, Liam's favorite color. His notes for the speech sat folded in his pocket, untouched. He had practiced them all week, but knew he wouldn't need them. Emily appeared beside him, her hand warm on his arm. "You ready?" Caleb smiled. "Only if you are." They both turned as Liam approached, dressed in a blazer a few sizes too big, his curls combed neatly, but already starting to rebel. He looked up at Caleb, eyes nervous but determined. "You don't have to do this," Caleb said gently. Liam shook his head. "I want to." The auditorium lights dimmed, and a hush fell over the crowd. On stage, a large screen lit up with images of children in music classes, learning to code, building projects out of cardboard and imagination. Then a video played. Clips of Emily teaching piano to neighborhood kids, Liam helping a younger student with guitar chords, Caleb leading a group of teens through a startup simulation. A quiet narration from Emily flowed beneath it. Sometimes, we don't get to choose how our stories begin, but we can choose what we do with the chapters we still have. Applause swelled. Caleb stepped onto the stage. He paused for a breath, letting the moment settle. Then, without looking at his notes, he spoke. "Not long ago, I thought success was about winning, about being the smartest person in the room, the one who always came out ahead. I didn't realize that in chasing the world, I was running from myself. And in doing so, I missed the most important chapter of my life." He glanced to the wings, where Emily and Liam stood just out of sight. "I met a boy who reminded me who I used to be, and a woman who never stopped believing in what could be. Together, they showed me that the only legacy worth leaving is the one that lifts others up." A pause. Then he smiled. "The Heart of Morgan Foundation is here because every child deserves the chance to be more than what the world expects. Through scholarships in music and coding, mentorships and community support, we want to build futures out of possibility, not limitations." He stepped back as the crowd applauded. And then, to a soft cue of piano music, Liam walked out. A murmur of surprise moved through the audience. Liam reached the podium. His fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted the microphone. "Hi, I'm Liam Hart Morgan," he began. A pause. Then he looked directly at the crowd. "My dad didn't just give me his name. He gave me back my voice." The silence that followed was profound. For years, I thought something was missing in me. I played guitar because music said what I couldn't. I watched my mom struggle, and I tried to be strong. But I always wondered what it would be like to have someone in my corner, someone who showed up not just for the good parts, but the hard ones. He looked over at Caleb. And then he did. Emily wiped her eyes behind the curtain. This foundation isn't just about tech or music. It's about second chances. It's about kids like me getting to dream bigger. And it's about parents finding the courage to rewrite the story, even when it seems too late. Liam stepped away, and the room erupted in applause. After the ceremony, journalists swarmed, but Caleb deflected attention from himself. He insisted the spotlight remain on the kids, the teachers, the local musicians who had volunteered. Emily mingled with the families, answering questions about the music program. Liam was surrounded by a group of teens asking about his guitar skills and how he wrote his first song. Later, as the event wound down, the three of them stood alone on the stage. "That was brave," Caleb said to Liam. "It was honest," the boy replied. Emily wrapped an arm around them both. That night, back home, Liam curled up on the couch, exhausted. Caleb tucked a blanket over him, brushing a curl from his forehead. On the nearby table sat the foundation's first scholarship application, already filled out by a girl from Liam's school. Emily joined Caleb at the window, looking out at the city lights. "You gave him more than your name today," she said quietly. Caleb shook his head. "He gave it to me. I just had to become someone worthy of it." In the reflection on the glass, the three of them stood together. Not perfect, but whole, and just beginning. A house with laughter. The moving truck was gone. The last of the cardboard boxes were flattened and stacked in the garage, and for the first time in years, the only sound Caleb Morgan heard echoing through his home was laughter, pure, unfiltered, deeply human laughter. It didn't come from the high-rise penthouse overlooking the financial district. It didn't come from one of his sterile boardrooms, lined with glass and silence. It came from a modest two-story home tucked away in a quiet tree-lined neighborhood, miles from the city skyline. The house wasn't big. It wasn't designed by a world-famous architect or decorated by interior designers flown in from Milan. The hardwood floors had scratches, the faucet in the kitchen squeaked, and the front porch sagged just enough to creak when you stepped on it. But for Caleb, Emily, and Liam, it was perfect. It was a Saturday morning, the kind where sunlight poured in through half-open curtains and the scent of cinnamon toast filled the air. Caleb stood in the doorway of the small living room, watching as Liam sprawled across the floor, flipping through old sheet music with guitar picks scattered like autumn leaves. Emily sat cross-legged by the fireplace, gently cleaning dust from an old photo frame she had unpacked, one that held a snapshot of her and baby Liam in a thrift store stroller. Caleb crossed the room and gently ran a finger along the upright piano's worn edge. "Still works?" he asked with a half-smile. Emily looked up and nodded. "Barely, but I've missed its voice." The piano had belonged to Emily's grandmother, and it had traveled with her through apartments, shelters, and back again. When they decided to buy a home together, not a mansion, not a Morgan estate, but a home, Emily had insisted they bring it. "It's where Liam first learned to tap the keys," she said. "It's where I remembered who I was." Caleb sat beside her, brushing her hand with his. "It's where I remember who you are, too." Liam looked up from his tangle of guitar strings and chords. "Are you two going to be sappy all day, or can we rehearse?" Emily chuckled. "Sassy today, aren't we? I'm 13. It's required by law." Liam grinned, strumming a teasing note. They gathered like that often now. No stage, no spotlight, just the three of them in their imperfect home, making music not for anyone else, but because it felt like breathing. That afternoon, they took a walk to the neighborhood park. Caleb carried a thermos of tea, Emily brought sketch paper, and Liam had his travel guitar slung over his shoulder. The wind was crisp but kind, the kind that hinted at fall, but hadn't quite let go of summer yet. They passed by neighbors, a retired mechanic pruning his rose bushes, a group of teenagers playing basketball, a young mother pushing twins in a stroller. No one recognized Caleb as the man who once graced Forbes covers. No one cared, and for the first time in his life, he liked it that way. He turned to Emily. "Do you miss the city? The energy, the buzz?" She shook her head slowly. "No, I miss this more. A sidewalk where our son can ride his bike without bodyguards. A kitchen where I can burn pancakes without 5 staff members rushing in to save breakfast." "And you?" she asked, eyes searching his. Caleb hesitated, then looked around. The rustling trees, the faded chalk drawings on the sidewalk, the sound of Liam laughing with 2 kids he'd just met by the swings. "No," he said finally. "I think I finally found a place where I can just be Dad. Not Mr. Morgan, not the CEO, just Caleb." Later that night, as the sky turned a deep velvet blue, they sat on the front porch under a string of fairy lights Emily had hung herself. Liam played softly beside them, the chord from a new composition drifting into the evening like a lullaby. Caleb leaned back in his creaky chair and closed his eyes. It wasn't perfection, it was better. There were nights Liam still asked about the years that passed, why things had happened the way they did. Emily would sit with him, answer what she could, and admit when the truth was just too tangled to explain. But there were also mornings when Liam ran into their bedroom, barefoot, holding a notebook of lyrics and shouting, "Dad, I figure out the bridge. Come listen." And those moments softened everything. One evening, they hosted their first dinner party, not for investors or board members, but for the neighbors next door and down the street. Caleb grilled burgers in the backyard, nearly burning half of them. Emily made lemonade from scratch and forgot the sugar. Liam played songs from the porch as kids danced in the grass. When the sun set and the last guest had left, Caleb stood in the kitchen helping Emily wash dishes. "Do you ever think about what we missed?" he asked quietly, handing her a plate to dry. She paused, the dish towel in her hand. "Sometimes, but I think more about what we've found." He looked at her, truly looked at her, and nodded. "Me too." That night, Liam crept into their room, holding a blanket. "I had a dream you were gone again," he whispered, "and that I couldn't find either of you." Emily opened her arms immediately, and Caleb scooted over. Without a word, the boy nestled between them. Caleb kissed the top of his head and whispered, "We're not going anywhere, kiddo. Not ever again." In the quiet that followed, Emily's hand found Caleb's beneath the covers. Fingers interlaced. A silent promise. Weeks passed, then months. The house filled with noise and memory. Liam's voice changing mid-song. Caleb dropping a bowl of cereal and laughing instead of cursing. Emily singing while cleaning. The worn piano stayed slightly out of tune, but none of them ever fixed it. Its imperfections had become part of their harmony. On a rainy Sunday, Caleb sat in his small home office, just a desk, a photo of Liam playing guitar, and an old notebook. He flipped to a blank page and wrote, "Legacy isn't built in glass towers. It's built in the quiet morning when your son calls you Dad. In the off-key duet on the porch. In the smell of burned toast and a piano that doesn't always cooperate. It's not built in wealth. It's built in love." He closed the book and stepped into the hallway, where Emily was humming, and Liam was making a mess in the kitchen trying to make waffles. He laughed. This was the life he never knew he needed, and he would never take a single moment of it for granted again. Mother to grandmother. It was a gray Sunday morning when Vivian Morgan showed up at the modest front porch with a linen-wrapped bundle cradled in her arms like something precious. She stood there for a long moment, unsure of whether to knock or retreat. The screen door creaked open before she could decide. Emily stood in the doorway, dressed in a cozy cardigan and jeans, a dish towel tossed over one shoulder. Her face was calm, but unreadable. Vivian cleared her throat. "I thought, maybe Liam might like these. They belong to my mother." She handed over the bundle. Inside were carefully preserved sheets of old music, handwritten in flowing ink, worn thin at the edges. "They were part of my first lessons," she added, her voice softer than Emily had ever heard. "Before business and ambition." There was melody. Emily nodded and stepped aside. He's in the living room. Practicing. Come in. Vivian entered like someone stepping into a memory she wasn't sure she belonged to. The scent of cinnamon and coffee hung in the air, and sunlight filtered through sheer curtains. On the piano bench, Liam sat hunched over a composition, his pencil tapping against the keys. When he looked up and saw his grandmother, his face broke into a tentative smile. "Hey, you came." Vivian approached slowly, placing the bundle beside him. "I brought you something old. Maybe you'll make it new again." Liam opened sheets like discovering a buried treasure. His fingers moved instinctively over the keys, testing notes, feeling out the history. Caleb entered moments later from the backyard, wiping his hands on a gardening towel. He stopped short at the sight, his mother seated beside his son on the piano bench, both quietly exploring a melody that had outlived generations. "He's remarkable," Vivian said without turning around. "Yes," Caleb replied. "He is." They sat for a while, the three of them, each in their own silence. Later, over lunch, Vivian asked questions. Not about business or school rankings or resumes. Real questions. About Liam's favorite composers, his recent school project, whether he liked the new arrangement of his latest song. Emily watched with cautious curiosity. It was like seeing an old statue slowly warm to life. As Caleb cleared the dishes, Vivian turned to Emily. "I owe you an apology." Emily looked at her. "For what?" "For stealing time, and assuming I had the right to decide what love looked like." There was a long pause. Then Emily replied, "We didn't just hurt me, Vivian. You hurt him. All of us." Vivian nodded. "And I'm trying to earn a place in what I broke." The words weren't perfect, but the effort was. Emily reached across the table and laid her hand gently on Vivian's. "Then let's start from there." That afternoon, as rain drizzled outside, they all sat in the living room. Liam played one of the old songs from the bundle, now rearranged with his own touch. Vivian hummed along, eyes misty. Later, as she stood to leave, she hugged Liam, a real, grandmotherly hug with both arms. Then, to everyone's surprise, she turned and hugged Emily. Not stiffly, not formally, but like a woman grateful for a second chance. And for the first time in a long time, the past didn't weigh down the room. It simply made the melody richer. A new song begins. The maple leaves swirled like rust-red confetti across the backyard, twirling in the crisp air as the sun hovered low on the horizon. The wooden porch creaked gently under the weight of 3 chairs, uneven in age and style, but pulled close enough to touch. Kayla Morgan sat in the center, a plaid blanket across his lap, one hand loosely gripping a coffee mug, the other resting on the armrest, just inches from Emily's fingers. Emily Hart, now Emily Morgan in every way that mattered, watched the leaves dance with a quiet smile, her eyes soft behind wire-rimmed glasses. Her hand rested on the neck of the guitar, propped beside her, untouched for the last hour. They hadn't played anything today, and somehow that silence held more music than anything they performed before. Liam was sprawled on the porch steps, chin resting on his arms, watching a squirrel investigate the edge of the garden. A worn pick stuck out from behind his ear, a habit he still hadn't dropped even when not playing. His acoustic guitar sat beside him, unopened. This was not a day for performance. It was a day for stillness. "Do you remember that first fall?" Emily asked, her voice threading softly into the moment. "The one where we met. The smell of chalk and wood polish in the old music room. You spilled coffee on your manuscript and spent an hour trying to dry it under the radiator." Caleb chuckled, the sound deep and gravelly. "And you offered me your notes, but only after making me promise to stop writing in Comic Sans." She nudged him gently. "Because it was a crime. You deserve to be cited." Liam snorted. "What's Comic Sans?" "Exactly," Emily replied, raising her brow. Caleb turned to Liam with mock seriousness, a font that nearly ruined classical music. They laughed together. It was easy, easier than it had been for a long time. The kind of laughter that came after storms, when the sky hadn't quite cleared but no longer threatened. It was laughter not born of jokes, but of survival. Caleb's gaze drifted to the maple tree in the corner of the yard. It had been the one thing he insisted on planting when they bought the house. Not for shade or for beauty, but because it reminded him of the tree outside the conservatory where he and Emily used to sit as students. That tree had listened to his first attempt at the melody that would change his life. Now this tree listened too. The most precious thing, Emily said suddenly, as if finishing a thought she'd been carrying for a while, wasn't the song. It never was. Caleb turned his head, eyes narrowing thoughtfully. It was that you didn't give up, she said simply, voice tight with emotion. You came back, when it would have been easier not to, when the world had already made room for your absence. You still came back. He didn't answer right away. The wind whispered around them, gently tugging a strand of Emily's hair across her face. Caleb reached over and tucked it behind her ear with a tenderness that didn't need words. Then he looked at Liam, the boy who was now almost as tall as he was, whose fingers moved over frets and strings with more soul than technique, whose eyes held every shade of both his parents' past and future. I didn't need to be a miracle, Caleb said finally, his voice catching. I just had to stay. Silence again. But this time was sacred. Liam stood and stretched, walking over to the guitar and picking it up. He didn't sit back down immediately. Instead, he wandered toward the center of the yard, kicking through the leaves. The golden hour lit his hair like a halo. Then he began to play, not one of the pieces they'd practiced, not even something Caleb recognized. It was new, tentative at first, like a thought taking shape. Then bolder, more certain. Notes climbed like the branches of the maple tree, rustling with joy, then dipping into minor chords that wept gently without breaking. Emily and Caleb exchanged a glance. He's writing his own, Emily whispered. Caleb nodded slowly. A new song. And as Liam played, the two of them rose quietly and joined him. Emily reached for the piano bench inside and rolled the small upright keyboard they kept for outdoor rehearsals onto the porch. Caleb, without a word, opened the cello case leaning against the wall. They didn't speak. They didn't ask permission. They just played. And together, beneath the turning leaves and the deepening sky, they wrote a new song. Not in measures and bars, but in forgiveness and faith, in second chances and earned tomorrows. No audience, no lights, just a boy and his music, a woman and her strength, a man and his vow to never walk away again. The melody rose, and the new chapter began. There's something hauntingly familiar about Caleb Morgan's story. The idea that success can be deafening, drowning out the very music that once made us feel alive. Like many adults navigating modern life in America, I've spent years chasing milestones, promotions, accolades, financial security. Yet somewhere in the quiet between meetings and screen time, I've felt the ache of something missing. Caleb's rediscovery of Emily, and more poignantly, of Liam, his son he never knew, feels less like fiction and more like a mirror held up to anyone who's ever wondered what their ambition may have cost them. His journey isn't just about reconciliation with the past, but the radical courage it takes to stop, to stay, and to be present. That lesson lands hard. What moved me most was not the grand gestures or public moments, but the silent ones. When Caleb listened to Liam's music without speaking, when he walked away from power to earn trust, when he said, I didn't need to be a miracle. I just had to stay. In our world of constant productivity, where being busy is a badge of honor, staying emotionally, spiritually, physically present is the truest act of love. Caleb teaches me that legacy isn't about the empires we build, but the people we come home to. I think of my own relationships, some frayed by time, others left unattended. His story reminds me that it's never too late to tune back into the song of those connections, to ask, what did I miss? And how can I be here now? There's also something profoundly human in Vivian's transformation, from a controlling matriarch driven by fear to a grandmother humbled by a grandson's melody. It reminds me that change is possible even for those we thought incapable of it. Forgiveness isn't instant, nor is it perfect, but it's possible when hearts stay open. Emily's willingness to forgive, not just for her sake, but for Liam's, is an act of grace we rarely see celebrated. It challenges me to look at the grudges I hold and ask if they're protecting me or preventing me from healing. If there's one takeaway I carry from this story into my life, it's that love, real, grounded, imperfect love, asks not for perfection, but for presence. It grows in late-night guitar lessons, in apology-filled silences, in the space where ambition gives way to authenticity. Whether with my children, my partner, or my aging parents, I don't need grand plans to reconnect. I need to show up. Caleb didn't reclaim his family with wealth. He reclaimed it with time, attention, and the willingness to change. So maybe today, I'll close my laptop a little earlier, listen a little longer, hug a little tighter. Not because life is perfect, but because, like Caleb, I've learned the music matters most when it's played for the people we love. Thank you so much for being here. Your support means everything, and I can't wait to bring you more heartfelt stories soon. Until next time, stay kind, stay inspired, and I'll see you in the next one.